Hi, this is John Lineval from John Lineval Tutoring, and this is AP US History Video 21, Native Americans After the French and Indian War. If you like this video, please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. All those things really help me out. And if you don't like ads, try my community at testpreparation.locals.com, which has all this and more. And no ads. Alright, the Treaty of Paris of 1763 ended the French and Indian War. France ceded practically all of its land in North America to the British, including all land in Canada, so everything that's to the north, not on the map, and east of the Mississippi River, so everything along here. In case you're wondering, this map displays what was going on in 1789. So you have the colony of Louisiana, which was, then of course became Spanish territory, and the Viceroyalty of New Spain, also Spanish territory. The Pacific Northwest was unclaimed territory, and everything else was British, except for, of course, Florida, which was Spanish. So here we go. Conflicts in the Great Lakes region. So here are the Great Lakes: Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario is not visible on this map because it's kind of cut off. But anyway, after the French left their colonies, it became British. So the then British Great Lakes region was run much differently than it was under the French. While the French cooperated with Native Americans through gift exchanges, peace pipe ceremonies, intermarriage, negotiation, the modified religion, the idea of Catholic religion, much like the Spanish, they understood that if you wanted natives to get into Catholicism, you would need them to be able to include some of their own native ceremonies to make it something that was palatable to them. The British, led by I'll try that again. The British, led by General Geoffrey Amherst, did not see a need to continue that cooperation. So Amherst believed gift exchanges were a display of weakness, but the Native Americans believed generous gift-giving was a display of dominance and protection. Which makes sense. Look how rich we are. We can afford to give you all this stuff. Of course we can protect you. And think of the potlatch ceremonies of the natives of the Pacific Northwest. So you can see video 1 where it discusses the potlatch ceremony, my very first video in this series. And I'll put a link here and maybe even in the description below. So some Native Americans in the uncertain political environment tried to unite the tribes despite their infighting to preserve their way of life. In 1760 and 1761, one Delaware tribal leader, Neolin, warned of serious harm to Native Americans if the tribes didn't change. Neolin urged lessened contact with European fur traders and greatly reduced use of European goods such as firearms and alcohol. Reduced alcohol and firearm use, in my opinion, would be a good idea in any society, in all societies, and to lessen inter-tribal rivalries. This ideology underpinned later organized, which was sometimes violent, resistance. General Amherst was also Lord Amherst. So Amherst, Massachusetts, and the elite college, it's Amherst College, the rival school formed by people who left my alma mater, Williams College, was, basically, that was named after, or the town and the college were both named after Geoffrey Amherst, or Lord Geoffrey Amherst, or as they call him at Amherst, Lord Jeff. So several U.S. towns are named after him, or the town of Amherst, Massachusetts. For example, Amherst, New York. Notice I pronounce the H because that's the way people who live there pronounce it, as they pronounce the H, is the home of the University at Buffalo North Campus. I attended law school there. Amherst, Ohio, most likely in Ohio, they pronounce it the same way as they would in Buffalo, is the sandstone center of the world, and of course there's Amherst, New Hampshire. Geoffrey Amherst is the first Baron Amherst. You can look him up on Wikipedia. There's a link in the description below. And you may know him as probably the most famous, if not the first, practitioner of basically anti-Native American germ warfare through the use of smallpox-infected blankets. So someone did come to speak at Amherst, New York, to talk about, this town is named after someone who practiced germ warfare and genocide. Technically no, because the town of Amherst, New York is named after Amherst, Massachusetts. But anyway, close enough. It's named after a town that's named after Lord Jeff, so close enough. But I digress. Pontiac's Rebellion, a Great Lakes conflict. With the defeat of the French, the Native Americans who'd been allied with the French were in a predicament. The Ottawa tribe of northern Ohio, with no allies, had to deal with Britain's designs on its lands. British troops now occupied forts built by the French. Pontiac, chief of the Ottawa, allied his tribe with other native tribes to resist the British military presence. The resistance included attacks on Fort Detroit, which was now British, as well as 6 other forts and colonial settlements from what is now upstate New York to the south of Lake Michigan, as well as along the Appalachian frontier, where settlers were entering native territory. Remember how the French had to fight against the British who came through or around the Appalachians? Well, that's kind of what was going on here, is because obviously people were trying to settle there, and the natives were getting very restless because they didn't like the way the British were treating them. Anyway, Pontiac, Michigan, home of the Pontiac Silver Dome, and after which the Pontiac automobile is named after Pontiac. Makes perfect sense. So they named the town after the Native American leader. They named the town after the Native American leader, Pontiac. And they named, of course, the stadium, which is now closed, the Pontiac Silverdome, and of course the car. Pontiac is also named after the town of Pontiac, which is named after Pontiac, the great Native American. Next rebellion. Pontiac's attacks worked at first. He and his allies captured several forts west of Detroit. So we can see Fort Miami, so Miami, Ohio. You may have heard of the Miami University of Ohio. Fort Ulatenon, if I'm butchering the pronunciation, I apologize. Fort St. Joseph, and Fort Michilimackinac. Again, if I messed that up, I'm very sorry. And then, of course, Fort Sandusky, Fort Presque Isle, Fort Le Boeuf, Fort Venango. So these are all forts that were captured by the Native Americans. And Pontiac killed or captured over 400 British troops and 2,000 British settlers. General Amherst was replaced by the much more competent Thomas Gage in August of 1763, who managed to quash Pontiac's rebellion by 1764. Smaller armed conflicts between Native Americans and British colonists and/or troops occurred until the American Revolution, when the Native Americans sided with the British. The Proclamation Act. Now, this was a law that drew a line through the Appalachian. So here we see it on the map, the 1763 King's Proclamation, setting a border colonists were not allowed to cross. The idea was to set aside lands in the Midwest for Native Americans and avoid further battles with the natives. The British also wanted to continue their fur trade with the Native Americans. So obviously they wanted to leave the Native Americans alone so they could hunt for beavers and things like that and sell their pelts. This really annoyed colonists who wanted to settle the land controlled by the natives, especially since the colonists believed they'd made great sacrifices in the French and Indian War effort. So said, hey, we did all this work, how come we're not getting paid? This is crap. So, and here's the proclamation by the king. Conflict in the Midwest. So here's our map that we looked at again. The central part of North America, which is presently the U.S. Midwest, was fertile farmland. As you might guess, colonists who wanted to farm were not pleased with being denied access to it. The decades following the French and Indian War were full of tension between eastern city dwellers. So you can see kind of here's, Philadelphia, here's, New York City, things like that, Boston. So we have eastern city dwellers along the coast, and then farmers who were to the west. Remember, the western United States was over here. Like, this was the Northwest back then. Northwest, we're not talking Seattle, we're talking, Chicago, things like that. Anyway, so Western farmers who wanted to move into the Midwestern land occupied by Native Americans. And I suppose, really, Chicago didn't exist as much of a city. There was maybe a settlement there in 1787, because that was the whole point here, is people wanted to come settle here, but mostly weren't allowed to. Anyway, so people wanted to move west, settle in Ohio and things like that, and weren't being allowed to do that. After the Revolutionary War, the migration of poor potential farmers to the Midwest increased greatly, causing conflicts with Native Americans as well as Spanish and British colonists and troops on the borders of the new United States. Scotch Irish settlers. The Scotch Irish were Presbyterians who'd settled in Ireland but were of Scottish ancestry and who were particularly suited to farming. Immigrants from the southwestern states of Germany also immigrated to Pennsylvania, etc. The German immigrants were good farmers and artisans, that is, people who did things like smithing, blacksmithing and things like that. That's what an artisan is. It's more of a laborer. They're not talking about an artist, somebody who makes paintings or something like that, or sculptures. So anyway, they were good farmers and artisans as well as laborers. So here we see a sign from the Middle Spring Church in Pennsylvania, founded 1738 by pioneer Scotch Irish Presbyterians. Until 1781, the church was at the old cemetery, So, okay, and they rebuilt the church, rebuilt the parsonage. Anyway, so you can see Scotch Irish Presbyterians wasted no time building churches in areas that they settled. The reason they settled in Pennsylvania is there were better economic prospects in Pennsylvania. The Scotch Irish mostly immigrated to Philadelphia, but obviously that was already a city, so they couldn't farm there. Some went to New York City, but the land along the Hudson was already taken up by large estates owned by people who didn't want or need to sell them. So Hudson wasn't going to do you any good. Farm labor in the South was done by slaves, so moving south wouldn't do any good, and New England's society was very homogeneous and not welcoming to the Scotch Irish because it had people who were mostly of English descent, who practiced a different religion, and they really did not want these Scotch Irish people coming and living with them. So the interior of Pennsylvania presented a near-ideal opportunity for Scotch Irish farmers. The Paxton Boys. Now, there's a link to the Paxton Boys Wikipedia entry in the description below. The Paxton Boys were frontiersmen of Scottish Ulster Protestant origin from along the Susquehanna River in central Pennsylvania, who formed a vigilante group to retaliate in 1763 against local American Indians in the aftermath of the French and Indian War and Pontiac's War. They are widely known for murdering 20 Susquehannocks in events collectively called the Conestoga Massacre. The creation of the Paxton Boys was a culmination of anger from Pontiac's rebellion and the lack of action taken by the Pennsylvania government. So you can see here's a plaque at the site of the Conestoga Indian Massacre, December 27th, 1763. The frontiersmen had settled in the hinterlands of Pennsylvania, so kind of the boonies, violating treaties with natives. They claimed Native Americans had raided their village, killing villagers. And here's some more from the Wikipedia entry. In the aftermath of the French and Indian War, no Europeans had yet settled in the frontier of Pennsylvania. A new wave of Scots-Irish immigrants encroached on Native American land in the backcountry, often in blatant violation of previously signed treaties. These settlers claimed that Indians often raided their homes, killing men, women, and children. Reverend John Elder, who was the parson at Paxton, became a leader of the settlers. He was known as the Fighting Parson and kept his rifle in the pulpit while he delivered his sermons. Elder helped organize the settlers into a mounted militia and was named captain of the group known as the Paxton Boys. So you can see went from Paxton to Paxton to finally Paxton, and that's where the name came from. So I mean, definitely a lot of people looked at it and said, well, wait a minute. These people moved into land they're not supposed to be in. The people who are supposed to live there, the Native Americans, said, hey, get out. And they said, oh, how dare you tell us to get out? Or how dare you try to force us off your land like that? It's a bit of a problem. So, all right, and it says here, the original target of the Scots-Irish militia were probably the Moravian Indians at Nain and Wichtank. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that pronunciation. However, the Paxton Boys were not able to carry out that plan and perhaps just chose the Conestoga Indians as an easy target instead. I hope that's not true, but it's a possibility. The Paxton Boys continued. In 1764, January 1764, after their attacks on Conestoga, roughly 250 Paxton Boys marched on Philadelphia to petition the legislature. Arriving in Germantown, the Paxton Boys agreed to leave when Benjamin Franklin agreed the legislature would consider their complaints and their, in quotes, apology, really just more of an explanation, for the Conestoga Massacre. Upon consideration of the facts, Franklin, along with many Pennsylvanians, considered the Conestoga Massacre to be completely savage and unjustified. Lazarus Stewart, a former Paxton Boys leader, was killed by the Iroquois in 1778 in the Wyoming Massacre. So, basically, Lazarus Stewart was killed during the Revolutionary War. Okay. Not saying as an opinion about the Revolutionary War, just kind of had to breathe there. Anyway, did you find this video useful? Please like it and subscribe to my channel. Neither action costs you anything, and you'll be alerted about my new videos. Why do I care? It's simple. YouTube doesn't let me share any ad revenue unless I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of view time in a year. And by the way, YouTube did let me know officially, they notified everybody that even if I'm not participating in whatever they call their program where I get to share some ad revenue, they still reserve the right, have the right, you can read that as will put in ads. So if you see ads in my videos, I am not getting paid for those. So please help me get to the point that at least I am getting a little piece of the pie here, since you have to watch the ads anyway, right? Okay. I don't have 1,000 subscribers at this time. I don't have 4,000 hours of watch time. If you do want to see this whole thing without any ads, you can always try joining my community at testpreparation.locals.com. And for the same reasons that I've just listed, you are welcome and even encouraged to share links to this video, put it in playlists, etc. I am always happy to read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos. You can look at my previous videos where I've made mistakes. I will own it if I make mistakes. If you have a comment and you think I made a mistake, please let me know. That way you help these videos get better. And I'm always happy to hear about suggestions for new videos. If you want to see something, I'll try to make a video on it. I do have one that I still have to work on, but anyway, I reserve the right to delete comments from and block those who specialize in destructive criticism, trolls, or things that are off topic, spammers and disturbed people. You can hire me for tutoring I am in the San Francisco Bay Area. I can certainly come to your home, subject to current COVID distancing, etc. laws, orders. And I can tutor you anywhere in the world through Zoom or some similar online platform. So if you want my contact information, keep watching this, and it's coming up. And I also have an important kind of information at the end here. So anyway, thanks for watching. You can contact me at www.facebook.com/Linaball Tutoring. My last name and tutoring all listed as one word. Instagram is instagram.com/john.linaball.tutoring. Phone 415-623-4251. John at johnlinaball.com, www.johnlinaball.com, johnlinaballtutoring.com, testpreparation.locals.com. And if you want to send good old-fashioned U.S. postal snail mail, you can mail me at John Linaball Tutoring, 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 94133. Note, this is not a substitute for your classes, text, etc. This video is based on Barron's AP United States History Review Book, 4th edition. Any other sources listed in the video description and in the video, so mostly Wikipedia articles in this particular video. And while this should help you do well on the AP US History exam, I can't be responsible for what your teacher thinks is important and asks you about in his or her own tests, homework, etc. Please read your class text and please pay attention to what your teacher says in class. All right, hope you're having a good day. Today is Christmas when I'm recording this, so if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. Otherwise, hope you're having a nice day off school, etc. Although I guess with COVID, probably most of you aren't going to school anyway. All right, have a good day.